So I think I've got 10 minutes. I'll try and do my very best. I'm just going to go through really in two parts really, before I hand over or two parts in terms of me and Trish. So I'm going to tell you a bit about Aspire, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and I'm going to tell you a bit about Improve and the differences in terms of from one organisation to the other. And as Vicky's kind of said, I've been at Aspire now for just over two and a half years, and prior to that I was at the Regenda Group for 10 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But first off, I can just tell you about the Aspire Group. So the Aspire Group, we are a housing association based in Newcastle under Lyme. We have three parts of the organisation, which I'm going to talk through very briefly. The first part being the Aspire housing brand. Basically, our vision is about building better futures. So not too dissimilar to a lot of the colleagues in the housing sector. So the Aspire housing brand, we own about 8,500 homes in North Staffordshire and South and East Cheshire. We've got a strong presence in Newcastle under Lyme, about 91% of the registered provider stock in that area. We've got ambitions over the life of our corporate plan, which is to 2021 to develop 1,700 homes within the area, and we have around about 420 employees. So basically what we do is we reinvest in new homes, communities and support services. We have had, the same as all organisations within the sector, we've had a huge kind of impact from the welfare reform and the 1% rent reduction that we've had to take out lots of kind of create more efficiencies across the organisation over the last year or so, and that will go forward for the next 3 or 4 years. And we're very much led by the external environment. And listening to Fiona before the break around our regulator and all that our regulator drives us to do, be it about benchmarking, KPIs, etc., is a real dichotomy in terms of having a business model and a way of working that we don't sway from that, but we actually can do something a bit more innovative and creative. So that's part of the group in terms of the housing part. And then this is something else that we're really proud of at the Aspire group, is PM training. So PM training is an apprenticeship provider, a training and apprenticeship provider. And over the course of the last financial year, we've supported over 2,400 people with training and employment. And that's primarily in the Newcastle under Lyme area and Stoke-on-Trent. So we run schemes, apprenticeship schemes. We're funded by the Employment Funding Agency and the Skills Funding Agency. We get funds from them, and then we provide training to a whole range of young people that want to enjoy work either as plumbers, gas fitters, social media skills, a whole variety of things that they come into the organisation, and then we work with 1,300 businesses and then we place them out within the organisation. So it's a big part of what we do at PM Training. Homeworks and Artworks is really that part of the business where we're developing what we call our operative workforce in terms of getting out and delivering services to our customers in relation to their responsive repairs. And Artworks is kind of designer metalwork, which is really interesting. We've been commissioned to do some interesting pieces of work in the Newcastle borough in terms of on roundabouts, and you'll see, if you ever drive through Newcastle under Lyme, you'll see big pictures of goldfish and all sorts of things, artwork that are on roundabouts there. So it's a big part of the organisation in terms of what we do. And then lastly, the last part is the Realise charity. So the Realise charity is about helping people to progress in their education and gain employment. I'll give you some kind of indicative figures there in terms of the number of people we've supported in 16, 17. And again, it's building on improving our neighbourhoods and tackling health inequalities. And basically what it is, the circle of the companies is that the profit that PM Training make, because it's a profitable organisation, then gets regenerated through what we call gift aid back into the Realise charity, so that they can then go and do other great stuff within our communities. So that's a very quick snapshot of us as an organisation. And then that combined together is that we are the Aspire Group. So then that's me. You know, kind of when you're doing slides and you're trying to think of something whizzing to put up on the presentation in terms of pictures and etc. etc. I'm never particularly very good at that. So that's me thinking about who am I and how did I get here. And I don't know about any of you in the room, but sometimes, you know, quite a lot of the time, I think, you know, I've got that imposter syndrome, you know, that feeling of how did I get here? How did I get to what I'm doing today? And surely somebody's going to find me out very soon in terms of actually, I'm just a South East London girl. I was talking to John earlier about this. I'm the youngest child. South East London. I'm the youngest child of 7. We lived in council properties for as long as I can remember. I left school in 1983. I know that's probably hard to believe. I didn't go to university. I started my career in the typing pool of the Inland Revenue in Somerset House. And then through, I think a lot of kind of luck and being in the right place at the right time, and also I think kind of my own attitude and behaviours, I think I got to where I am today. So I'm the Executive Director of Corporate Services at the Aspire Group. And I do sometimes wake up and think, oh shit, how did I get here? Somebody is going to find me out very soon. But it was really refreshing to hear what was said earlier around how much emphasis that organisations don't place on processes. Because I think I'm a very systematic and logical thinker, and I'm organised to the you know, I've been accused of being particularly anal about being organised, because I like to be organised, I like to be prepared, I like to be planned. And UIC is all of that. UIMPROVE is all of that. It's all about having good systems and good processes in place. So I've been working with UIMPROVE since 2010, and I was talking earlier to Steph around kind of how we got involved in UIMPROVE, because I used to work in Regenda, which is where Steph and Nina come from, and Steph joined Regenda in 2010 as a member of the executive team, and she said to me, why don't we look at this? Why don't we look at, you know, kind of UIMPROVE? Because at that point in the organisation, probably like many of us in organisations, I think executive teams sometimes can struggle with how we can translate that vision and mission that Steve talked about yesterday into real activity and real things that actually make a difference, and that kind of shift from looking at people to blame rather than the processes. So what we did at Regenda was quite similar to then what I took to Aspire. We took a group of people to a bit of a taster session on UIC, so just a 3-day UIS program, sorry. And we took some people along to that, and they had a bit of a taster. So they came back and they was all infused, and that then prompted the executive team at Regenda to go along and do the strategic leadership program. And I think that was over 3 modules, Richard, if I can remember that correctly. So we did the 3 modules over X number of months at the Regenda organisation, and that really got it embedded within Regenda. And then time moves on, doesn't it? Things happen. I left in 2014. I joined Aspire, and Aspire was in a very similar situation to where we was at Regenda at that particular point, in terms of, you know, it was all a bit of a jumble. It was all a bit of a kind of, everybody was doing lots of activity but not quite clear how it was knitting together. You know, we couldn't be clear about what the projects were across the organisation. We had a business improvement team that was, you know, within the sector, we're really good at having these teams that manage policies and processes and systems. So that allows everybody a bit of a cop-out within the rest of the business, because you have this team doing it. So I kind of just stopped and watched and listened a bit more. And thinking, okay, so how can we do this here? Because knowing the executive team that I was brought into at Aspire was very different to the executive team at Regenda. Not a good or bad thing, it was just the way it was. People, you know, different times, different people. And I was thinking, so how can we do this here at Aspire? Because I don't think that I will be able to get my executive team at Aspire sitting on the strategic leadership programme, being told how to use a notebook is going to go down well, in terms of me being able to embed this across the organisation. And I absolutely buy the cultural shift that the whole concept of using the notebook is about, but at that point going into the Aspire organisation, I thought they're just going to kick me out if I go in and introduce this and get them to come along to the strategic programme. So I made a decision not to. So what I did is I just engaged and I listened and I watched. I watched the team that was responsible for doing all of these kind of so-called projects and what we call team delivery plans, and we had complicated systems and Excel spreadsheets that everybody was working on, and heads of service had responsibility. So somebody from the business improvement team would send heads of service an email saying, you need to update your team delivery plan, and it was meant to contain a list of projects. It wasn't projects, it was loads of business as usual activity. I had this team that was just constantly churning out all of this stuff that really wasn't making that much of a difference, but they were wedded to it. They were wedded to it. They liked Lean, they liked Sigma, they liked Prince, and you know, you kind of think, oh, okay, I'm not going to upset them too soon. So what I did, similar to what we did at Regenda, is I set up a UIS program and took them all off, and I went. So I think this must have been about the fourth time that I've done a UIS program in terms of just, you know, to be able to watch and see people's, you know, the impact of that program. So took them all along, and yes, the light bulb moment. Everybody came back from that thinking, yeah, this is great. This is great. This is the way we should be doing it. It's simple, you know, it's easy to follow. We can see the impact that this will have across the organisation. And so, yeah, I got them on board. So from that point, we then just started to test it out a bit. We did a first kind of dummy run of an annual planning cycle. It wasn't the true where we've ended up today, but we just started to explore and understand it a bit better. And then we went on to develop that further. So we went on in terms of training facilitators, so we now have got 12 facilitators across the organisation, 4 of whom are with me over the last couple of days. I'm delighted. And then we've put all of our heads of service through that, and some of our further of our management team in terms of the UIS programme. So of our management population, which is about 80, around about 65 of those have now undertaken the 3-day UIS programme, so we're really starting to get it embedded across the organisation. So in terms of the results, for me, you know, kind of what we've heard over the last couple of days is really significant for me on a number of fronts. And I think we talk a lot about projects, and we talk about the methodology that UIMPROVE gives us around projects. But for me, it is so much more than the projects piece. For me, it's around that culture that it sets within the organisation, that culture of ownership and accountability and responsibility. And I suppose in a way, I think maybe a bit different to other people in terms of, I don't want us to have a business improvement team. I don't want us to have a team that is responsible for doing business improvement. Because for me, what this gives us is a whole set of skills and tools that enables all of us to do it. That we don't have to have specific project managers. Because the tools that we're being taught from UIMPROVE, that you can embed within the organisation, means that we can all have the joy of experiencing that. I think that there has to be something about the coordination and the consistency, that constancy of purpose piece, which comes from the executive team. And I suppose part of my message is you don't necessarily need to have the whole of the executive team brought into that. I think if you've got one individual that sits on the executive team that is that person that can drive that down the organisation, then I think it works as well. So I think it's, for me, it's much more than the project. It's about the culture and the vision and the values, and that everybody can be a project leader. And when, so in 14-15, going back to those team delivery plans, we had 260 projects. So, you know, we're an organisation. At that point, we had about 600 staff, but, you know, we've come down in numbers now to 420. But in 14-15, we had 260 projects. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew kind of where they started, where they ended, projects that had been going on for probably 4 or 5 years. You know, it was like kind of, you know, it was just a mess. 15-16, we'd kind of had our first kind of bit of a trial at the first annual planning cycle, which is absolutely embedded across the organisation. There was a question from yesterday. We have a corporate calendar that's communicated every year, from the budget setting progress to team project steering grids to corporate project steering grids to setting up kickstarts, the whole range of things. 15 and 16, we had 180 projects. 16, 17, 126. And for this year, for 17-18, we've got less than 100. And we had a fantastic event on the 7th of April where we had the whole of the management population together, the whole of that 80, and we had all of our project steering grids around the room. Each head of service did a presentation, and then we did a bit of a cocktail party in terms of getting people to go around and say, is there a duplication there from anything you're working on? Is there something there that's missing that you think we should be doing that comes back to our corporate plan in terms of our, our vision and our mission? And then we had a whole discussion which was fantastic. It lasted the whole day, but the richness of it reduced the projects that were there by another kind of half a dozen or so, and created 2 corporate projects. So in terms of them being able to lift up some of the work that's being done, so the beauty of it, and it's really visible for everybody, everybody's on board, everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and it's like across the organisation. So in terms of the SSS, it's not anything sinister, it's smarter, simpler, slicker. And that's the mantra that we have across the organisation. It's about everything has to be smarter, simpler and slicker in terms of the way that we do things. It absolutely embeds engagement. You know, we've got the voices of people that are being heard now that were never heard before because of the way that they're engaged in terms of project kickstarts or whatever it might be. So you're getting the voices of everybody heard. It's improvement, because it is about improvement at the end of the day. You know, improvement takes place project by project. You know, I think we're clear now about the distinction between business as usual and projects. It's absolutely got ownership. You know, we've got ownership across the business now. You know, and you know, I've often asked the question, are we not going to train everybody on a 3-day UIS? Absolutely not. For me, it stops at managers level, because it's the managers that critical mass that has the biggest impact across the organisation. And it's given the golden thread from the vision right through to business as usual and all the objectives. The other thing that I would like to share before I pass over to Trish, we're coming up to my 10 minutes, if not over, is some of the thinking that it's also given us, I mean myself particularly, is that if you think about that annual planning cycle, if you think about the establishment of projects, if you think about the way that people are involved, it really questioned for me, what is the purpose of performance annual appraisals, individual and objective setting? Because isn't there something about that as you set up each of those individual projects and you do your chronological clustering and you identify all the activities and you assign responsibility, isn't that an objective for the individuals? And aren't organisations that got this tendency to kind of have these processes where you sit down once a year, you set objectives that may be outside of what's on the project steering grid, you sit down once a year and you talk about, so what have you done well this year and what's coming up? So we've scrapped all of that at Aspire. We no longer have that annual appraisal process, that form-filling exercise where you sit down and kind of have that conversation. Partly because I believe, you know, it's not linked to pay, so there's no kind of grading thing that you have to do in terms of assigning to pay, which I personally think doesn't work anyway. And also, you know, we're pushing and promoting our staff to have conversations all the time with their teams. So actually sitting down once a year, we're still saying that people need to sit down and talk, but filling out a form is a waste of time in my opinion. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that. So we've scrapped that, and we're giving our managers a bit of kind of, it's up to them whether they want to sit down and set objectives, but we're not being prescriptive about that. Because what I want to see is every member of our organisation being involved in a project, which means then they don't particularly need to have an objective. There will inevitably be objectives. There'll be personal development plans. You know, I'm not suggesting that we're not going to develop our staff. You know, we will still be doing that. But I think those old systems, for me, are just no longer valid in the organisation there in terms of the work that we've done. So that's all I wanted really to say today, in terms of a little bit about kind of the difference and my move from organisations, and then Trish is going to talk us through, I think, her experience as a facilitator and also how you've applied some of the tools and techniques. So thank you for that.
Where are we? Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Well, just to give you a bit of a background as to how I ended up at Aspire, I was telling Richard and Jane and Alison over breakfast this morning that I kind of fell into housing. Initially, I did my degree in public services because I wanted to be a police officer. But I started working within care and had that kind of epiphany moment that I was a helper not a, what was the word I used?
Enforcer.
Not an enforcer, that's it. So, having worked at other housing associations, I found myself at Aspire Housing, and I've just come up to my 1-year anniversary there. So I'm just going to give you a background of what I'm going to talk about. So my UIMPROVE journey, the first encounters I've had with it, any training, understanding that I can share with yourselves, an application of how I've done this in the workplace within a customer setting, and some kind of hints and tips, and review kind of our next steps. So, this picture was taken a few weeks ago actually, but it kind of portrays what it was like when I came for my interview. So from the moment that I stepped foot in Aspire, I came across post-it notes. So I walked into a room, and on the table was some clear instructions, and it says, please use the flip chart, post-it notes and pens to answer the question for a presentation that you'll be delivering in 20 minutes. So for the first 2 minutes of that time, I couldn't correlate where do flip charts and post-it notes come together. So I pushed the post-it notes to one side, and in typical fashion did an old-fashioned spider diagram. When I came out of the office, I was ushered to another room to have my interview and to give the presentation. And as I walked through the building, all I saw was post-it notes. And I suddenly thought, oops, perhaps I shouldn't have pushed them to one side. Nevertheless, I did get the job, and from the first day, there was more post-it notes, project steering grids everywhere around the organisation. So when I arrived at Aspire, I kind of thought, what's all this about? You know, I see all these post-it notes and all these grids. I kind of need to know more. And I was lucky enough to be sat next to Annette, and she's our coordinator for the facilitators at Aspire. And when I sat next to her, there were piles of post-it notes and piles of flip charts, and I honestly thought, are they having a laugh? Annette kindly reassured me all would be revealed, and you know what? It was, and it was a true light bulb moment. I then went into a cocktail party, and projects came to life, and even the scary ones didn't feel so bad. They were manageable, bite-sized chunks, with realistic deadlines, and most importantly, people had ownership and responsibility. So as Tracy said, as Vicky said earlier, I did my facilitator course finished in January, and it was kind of, how was I asked to be trained as a facilitator? Well, I'm a dementia friend champion for the Alzheimer's Society, so I give a lot of talks out in the community, and Tracy came along to one of the sessions that I did, and sitting next to Annette, they kind of got their heads together and talked me into it, but it didn't take a lot of persuasion, and to be honest, it's the best thing that I've ever done. So, training as a facilitator. Like any new relationship, there is an element of anxiety and trepidation. But to be honest, I needn't have worried. It was the time of my life. It's so easy and natural, and it wasn't a forced process. And as Tracy alluded to earlier, our mantra of smarter, simpler and slicker just fitted it. So putting it into practice. So I'm a first-time team leader, and for me, as well as all of the whole book of tried and tested approaches, it was skills for how to manage day-to-day projects and lead a team. And to be honest, the scoping sessions for me have highlighted some of my team strengths and weaknesses inadvertently. And we've used it to help embed our new brand values, which are collaboration, creativity and ambition. And across the business, they've now been embedded. So I've titled this Keep Calm and Walk the Walk. So for me, it was get into it and get going. So after I was trained, not just sit back, actually say, yes, I can do this and have a go. And only you know if it's going wrong. I think we've all got this trepidation that, oh no, you know, that should have happened and that should have happened, but people don't know. And once I had a few assignments under my belt, I kind of thought, well, surely this could help in lots of other ways. So this is where I move on to community living. So I'm the team leader for housing and wellbeing support. And when I joined the organisation, obviously we've had a lot of funding cuts in terms of supporting people. We have 18 sheltered housing schemes, which we've now rebanded as community living. And we've had no option to make changes to enable the delivery of the service. And just before I started, we had a restructure, and the team of 22 went down to 7 people. But I'm a big believer that everything's happened for a reason, and although it's been a difficult journey, when the fog cleared, we have an opportunity of not being shackled by SP, and it's led to a lot of innovation and creativity. And from this, we've had to look at the new service model and how we're going to deliver our promises to customers moving forward. So one area I'm particularly proud of is a case study at Sneedland's Community Living Scheme, which I'm going to talk to you about, which I'm going to play a video for you shortly. We actually had a restructure at Sneedland's. We had at the time one full-time scheme manager that was living on the scheme, and we had one part-time scheme manager. And during the restructure, we went down to one part-time scheme manager to run the scheme. And a lot of the residents were saying, how are we going to still have the same service? How are you going to ensure your processes and things that matter to us happen? So we set out clear and realistic objectives for the advisor that were important to the customer. And to be able to do that, we actually held a cocktail party with all of the customers to ask them what's important to them. And then, as Tracy spoke about earlier, the projects that came out of that actually defined the role of the advisor for the next year. So sometimes we do things for the sake of them rather than asking the customers what we want. I think we're all, you know, we've all done that before. So I'm going to now show you the video.
It's nice to be involved.
Very good.
I mean, it shows that they're interested in us and what our point of view is.
So following the success of the session, we now have 100% customer satisfaction, and we don't actually own Sneedland's, we actually manage it on behalf of the Arms House charity. And the directors have been so pleased with the work that's gone on. They've actually renewed our contract for a further 3 years at a time when services are being withdrawn or charged for. Continuous improvement with customers at the heart of everything. Simple though the changes have been, the improvement to people's lives is amazing, and it's created certainty. And what we've decided to do is that we will do this every year, and at the end of every year we actually have a review session and we celebrate the improvements and things that have happened on the scheme. And we're actually now starting to roll this over to the other 18 schemes that we've now got across the organisation. So lessons learned for me and the business. Well, I think every business needs a Tracy and an Annette. So you need a champion at executive level, and you need a facilitator coordinator as your key point of contact. And also, kind of with the 4 eyes principle, you really need to be working in pairs, bouncing ideas off other facilitators. We have a shared drive for resources, so if we need to go on and print anything off, we can do that. And we also ask questions and kind of not always give the answers to people, because sometimes they have the answers. And I entitled the presentation Living the Dream because I honestly believed it. I was overlooked for a lot of team leader positions, and I feel that with UIMPROVE the tools are tried and tested, and there will always be something in the manual that helps you along your way. Practice makes perfect, and it's not just useful for the big stuff, all the work stuff, even day-to-day and in private life, tools that can help you. The accomplishment and direction the results provide generates positivity and energy across the organisation. And I think you use that to improve where you are and help you to get where you want to be. Thank you.